What is going on, guys? Greg here. Welcome back to another install video on the FL5 Type R. If you guys watched the last video, we did the full suspension install. We didn't get a chance to do the brakes on this, so we're going to do it today on this beautiful, hot, sunny Thursday. It's like 70-something degrees. It feels great. I just had a photo shoot done for the R32 GTR to get that listed for sale, so we could finally dig into this car. We're getting a wheel alignment on this tomorrow, so that gives us a full week for the suspension to settle. We've driven it already like 300 miles, so I don't think the suspension is going to drop any more than it already is. Got the car lifted up on the jack, and we're going to do the brake pads front and rear, do the brake lines front and rear, and then do the Motul racing brake fluid, and then flush it. So we got quite some work to do. Hopefully this shouldn't take more than a couple hours, but we want to take our time with it because brake lines are definitely something you don't want to mess up. If you have leaking brake lines, then you're probably going to crash your car. So here are the brake lines. They're for the FK8, so we're going to see if they work. The front ones definitely should, but the rears might be too short compared to the FL5 ones, so we'll see. Also have the Paragon titanium pad shims for the front pads, and these go in between the piston of the caliper and the brake pad itself. And the reason for this is to just reduce heat transfer from the pad to the caliper, which will really start to discolor your beautiful red Brembos. And people call these the brown bows because they start to turn brown if they get too much heat. Orange pad means it is the R10 compound. All right, we have the front wheel turned all the way to the left to make it easy to access the pads. All we have to do, all Brembos are the same. You just got to push these pins out through the inside of the wheel well, pop that out, the hardware comes apart, and then the brake pads you can wiggle out of the caliper. And then we're gonna need a piston compressor. So I have like a brake pad tool, which will actually allow us to push the pads outwards before we take them out, and then the pads will slide out very easily. All right, we got the pins removed. So now we have access to the pads. You can see that they could be wiggled loose. We're gonna get our brake pad spreader like this and spread the pads so that they compress the pistons. Get these open all the way as far as possible. You'll see that the brake fluid starts to come up, which is a good thing. So you see, OEM pad comes out very easily. Now we have access to the pistons. They're fully compressed. So now we can easily slide our new pads in like that. All right, we got the shims taken out. You can see these are very, very thin. Titanium, very light. So they literally just slide in between the piston and the brake pad. And just like that. This one also slides in perfectly like that. Easy. All right, so all you have to do, get the pads lined up with the pins, put the pin back in between the brackets here to keep the pads locked into the caliper. Now it's time to remove the OEM brake line. So this is the hard line that goes to the ABS. This is the nut that has to be loosened. And then everything that's rubber in between all the way to this aluminum block here is what's being replaced. And you can see that there's another nut there. That is the hard line that goes to the caliper. Once all of this is changed out, there's gonna be a ton of air in the brake line. So don't drive your car until you've flushed all the fluid and that there's no more air coming out of the bleed nipple. And that's what this is right here, this rubber cap. So we have a 10mm side and we have a 12mm side. This is a 10mm. So all you're gonna do is put it on the brake hose like that. So you kind of just make sure you got a good grip on it and then just crack it like that. And just like that, you see it's loose and it didn't strip anything. So it's important that you put a little drain pan down there to catch the brake fluid. And then we're gonna need a plier of some sort to pull out this retaining clip so that this way it can come out. All right, so we just cracked that nut loose and you can start to see the fluids already dripping into our pan there. And now we gotta do the same thing for this nut right there. But before I do that, I'm gonna take off this bolt that holds it to the knuckle, and then this bolt as well. Like that. And then now that's loose. There we go. All right, got the brake hose out. So this sits on that metal hinge right up in there. And in order to get the brake line out, you actually have to loosen this bolt here too. It's a 12 millimeter, just because if you try to take it off, it hits against the knuckle here. So just loosen that. You don't need to take it off all the way. I think lengthwise, they're about the same. All right, so we got to get a 17 millimeter wrench to hold the bottom of this while we tighten the brake line with the 10 millimeter. And we put the retaining clip back in. 12 millimeter bolts are back in. You can see it's still dripping because it's not fully tightened. This bracket is secured, brake line secured, that hard line is tightened up to the caliper. So just gotta do this one and then do the other side, and then we can start bleeding. All right, so we're here in the back, and the brake line on the OEM one is actually a couple inches longer than the new brake line, which is not a big deal because the OEM line has a ton of slack. As you can see, it goes all the way down and all the way back up, and the wheel is not touching anything. So we can just reroute the brake line sort of a different way. Obviously, it's gonna go down in the beginning. It's gonna mount in the OEM mounting location right there. But instead of the brake line coming all the way up and down, we're gonna kind of go down like this along the bottom and then route it kind of like this. And it's not gonna get in the way of the wheel. It's not gonna get in the way of anything. So someone else did this install already and they have it mounted from the bottom like this as well, instead of coming all the way from the top, because this little elbow right here, 30 degrees looks like, is gonna hit the parking brake right there. So we'll come in from the bottom and it's not gonna touch anything. So to do the actual pads, we're gonna go in and pull off this retaining clip with a plier, and then we're gonna remove the caps from up here. And then there's gonna be two bolts that we have to remove. 7 millimeter Allen. You're gonna use a socket to take those out. And then for the parking brake, these are 5 millimeter Allen. So there's one over there and there's one down there. And these are securing the caliper to the caliper bracket. All right, so we separated the parking brake from the actual caliper. You gotta use a flathead screwdriver and just pry them carefully apart because it is held into there. So parking brake assembly is loose now. You can just put that aside. All right, so we have the brake caliper assembly. This is an inverted Torx. It's called an E12. We're gonna turn this counterclockwise while we turn our brake caliper tool. It's a special tool meant for these style pistons. So there is basically two nipples, one on each side, which hold on to the piston and pushes the piston in while we turn this. So we turn this counterclockwise and we turn this clockwise, and you may have to adjust this to make sure that it's tight, or otherwise the nipples will slide off of the piston. So just keep turning it both sides until the piston is all the way retracted. All right, got our new pads. Put it onto the bracket like this. The one with the spring goes on the inside, and the one without goes on the outside, just like this. And then now we can just bolt our caliper back up like that, and then put our 2 bolts back in. Okay, now for the fun part, we're gonna take off the brake line. So 10mm flare nut on the chassis here, and then 14mm nut on the caliper itself. And that's it. That hose is off, as you can see, it's on the floor. We got the new hose already down here, so we're gonna go ahead and put that one up first, just so it stops leaking. And then we'll go down, route it around and up into the caliper. It does come with new hardware, new washers, so make sure you use that so there's no leaks. One washer goes on top of the banjo bolt, one washer goes below the banjo bolt. New hose, fully secured. Just like that. Solid. And don't forget the retaining clip. Job is all done. All brake lines installed, all pads installed. We just bled the fluids too. Always start with the corner that is furthest away from the brake master cylinder. So we did rear right, rear left, passenger front, and then driver front. There's a good time when you're bleeding it. We did the 2-person method, so we don't see any brake fluid coming out of the brake lines, so that is good. There's good pressure as well. Now to finish the job completely, we got to put all 4 wheels back on, torque the wheels to spec, and then we have to bed the brake pads. So that involves driving up to about 30 miles an hour, slowing down gradually to about 5 miles an hour. Do that about 5 times, let the brakes cool down, and then you're gonna go up to 50 miles an hour and then apply brakes pretty hard until you get to around 5 miles an hour again. Do that a few times. What we're gonna do is get to around 30 miles an hour, go down to 5, and just keep doing that over and over again for about 30 times. Very light braking. Now we're gonna do it up to 50. Harder braking. We're on a little bit of a hill here, so it's a little faster. Yo, these brakes are crazy good. Oh my God. I'm like stopping on a dime here. The braking on this is absolutely insane right now. I feel like I can send myself through the window. Check this out. That is wild. Let's try it one more time. That was about half. That is crazy. Yeah, I can definitely smell it now. No, that was like 5 hours of work to do all of that. You know, did the pads, the lines. The lines are giving me a little bit of an issue on the back. Just, you know, threading it properly is always a little bit annoying. But it was just something stupid that I was doing. But we got the pads, front and rear done, the lines, brake bled with the Motul RBF 600, and now we're just bedding the brakes right now. I'm pretty much done. So after you do the 30 mile an hour to 5, and then after you do the 50 mile an hour to 5, you just want to drive it, let it cool down, drive it normally after that, just so you're not getting like the brake pad stuck to the surface of the rotor, which is eventually going to warp your rotor. So you don't want to do that. But yeah, I haven't heard any crazy squealing yet, but let's see how the dust looks when we get back. You can definitely hear the squealing now. Here, check this out. I'm sure it'll get only louder the more that we break these pads in. All right, well, the dust isn't so bad yet, but you can definitely notice that they're starting to squeal, which I guess is a good sign that they're breaking in. All right, well, brake job done.